title of the story is The Polar Vortex. Daisy pressed the doorbell until it croaked. Ribbit, rack, ribbit, rack. She hoped her friend Mrs. Mispelseed would invite her and her little brother Bernie in for a chat. From behind the door, a ruckus erupted. Rack, plack, rack. Hortensia, the hen, was putting up a fight. Stand still, you leftover dinosaur, came the reply. That was Mrs. Mispelseed, and she sounded furious. Using his long white stick with a round ball on the end, young Bernie tapped his way to the door, where he laid an ear against the wood. A fine fabricious fracas this is with you, Hortensia. You no good and well, you will be blown away if you wear no harness. Daisy pushed the door wide and saw squat Mrs. Mispelseed standing with her hands on her hips, a strap dangling from her fist, and her gray hair pulled into a mushroom bun. Majestic Hortensia stood a distance away, her golden feathers fluffed. In that instant, a cool wind drifted past, raising goosebumps on Daisy's skin. The fierce lady noticed the children, one tall, one small, and said, "You try to get her into her harness, Bernie." "Give it to me," Daisy intervened. "I can do that for you, Bernie." But I know how. Bernie's lower lip quivered. "I felt how Hortensia wears the harness." He tossed his stick aside and strode into the entry hall. Daisy was astonished how well Bernie knew every root extruding from Mrs. Mispelseed's floor. Mrs. Mispelseed pressed the strap into the little boy's palm. "Bernie is quite capable. His fingers know what to do even if his eyes don't." Bernie ran his fingers along the length of the rough leather lead and flicked the lash on the cold metal buckle. Hortensia clucked and pecked his knee. Bernie stroked her back, felt her soft feathers. He gently slipped the harness over her head and pulled Hortensia's legs into place. He fitted the strap snugly against her sides and chest so she could stretch her wings before buckling the harness. Satisfied, Bernie stood up. Holding the looped end, he and Hortensia ran off to explore the house. "Patzer," Mrs. Mispelseed grumbled. "Stupid bird, thinks she runs everything around here. Come with me to the living room, Daisy. I need to tend to my vascular saplings." Mrs. Mispelseed grabbed a wooden stick propped against the wall and steadied herself with it as she walked. The living room in Mrs. Mispelseed's house was not full of sofas or armchairs, coffee tables, or cabinets of fine china. The living room was where things live, as Mrs. Mispelseed told anyone who asked. Nor did the living room have curtains or lamps, because the sun took care of darkening and lightening the room. She called her home the inside-out house, and it was indeed hard to tell where the inside ended and the outside began. As Daisy followed Mrs. Mispelseed, she stepped over the violets blooming along the threshold and aimed for the knee-high grasses. Her foot hit something mushy and the mud tried to trap her. Daisy jerked away, narrowly missing a thorny rosebush. Mrs. Mispelseed stopped under a tree where she reached up to rip off dark red cherries, which she dropped into a pocket of her skirt. Greedily, she grabbed more before looking down to exclaim, "Pappelkops! Cherry juice had seeped through the layers of her skirt, causing a crimson blotch to grow. What for did I even get out of the bed this morning? I should have stayed in my dreams." Mrs. Mispelseed held open the folds of her skirt. "Stupid skirt cannot even hold a few cherries without making a fuss." "Maybe today is a bad day to visit," Daisy suggested. "Bernie and I can come back another time." "You mean because my mood is crummy?" Mrs. Mispelseed asked. "Nonsense, girl. If you want me when I'm happy, then you must take me when I'm grumpy," she insisted, smashing her walking stick into the ground. The tidy woman turned to a row of spindly trees, as tall or as short as Mrs. Mispelseed herself. She murmured as she grasped a gray-blue leaf, the shape of a human hand. "Looks like they could use some spicing up with salt and pepper." The vascular trees were growing in very thick pots, but Daisy noticed the clay had cracks. Several meaty roots poked out sideways, pushing into the air. Looks like they need new pots too," she commented. "No need, they go outside tomorrow," Mrs. Mispelseed informed her. "I plant them next to the car parks. The roots break up the tarmac and work their way into the rubber of the tires. I try to do my part for the environment. She plucked some leaves and offered them to Daisy. Try one, they are delicious. As Daisy chewed the leaf, a minty, peppery sweetness filled her mouth. She scanned the room to find her brother so he could eat one. Hortensia stood out clearly under a currant bush, snapping up flies. Daisy spied Bernie lying on the moss-covered ground, his hair full of spider webs. Careful, he warned as Daisy approached. Don't disturb the traffic. Daisy gasped in horror. Parallel tracks of ants were making their way across Bernie's tummy in opposite directions. Where his shirt had come away, the ants walked on his bare skin. Stay still, Bernie, Daisy instructed. I'll get those icky bugs off you. Don't touch, Bernie whispered. Ants help each other. When one finds food, it leaves a trail of scent for the others to follow. Daisy struggled to stop herself from whacking away the insects. Won't they bite you? She asked. Not if I don't bite them. Suddenly, a cold gust of air burst through the window frames. Daisy shivered. The ants heard a command too quiet for Bernie or Daisy's ears and scattered. What happened? Where have they gone? Daisy asked. A couple are burrowing into my belly button, Bernie noted. My guess is they are trying to hide. Bernie rolled over onto all fours and sniffed the ground. He clicked his tongue repeatedly, listening for the echoes like a bat, then headed into a patch of ferns. Daisy wandered back to Mrs. Mispelseed, sat down on a boulder, and hung her head. Her friend was stroking the trunks of the skinny trees from bottom to top. It encourages growth, she explained. What is troubling you, girl? Daisy looked up. Her face turned red. Nothing, I'm fine, she replied. Pish posh, your eyebrows wrinkle and your mouth is a tiny lemon. Tell me what is on your heart before you grow up and forget. Daisy gathered pebbles from the living room floor and rolled them between her fingers. I'm worried about Bernie. Mom and Dad want to send him away to a special school because his year 2 teachers say he doesn't listen. Bernie had reached the cherry tree, still clicking his tongue. The two watched as Bernie's hands explored the bark. Does he look like he's not listening? Mrs. Mispelseed asked. She squished a cherry into the pot of each sapling until juice squirted out. He listens, but doesn't behave the way grown-ups expect, Daisy concluded. What can Bernie do? He smells things. He says you can learn so much from listening to your nose, but Bernie can't see, Daisy blurted out. Hortensia can't see either, Mrs. Mispelseed countered, but don't tell her that. She will fly at your jugular. Maybe it is your parents who need to listen. Daisy nodded. Bernie may only have 4 senses, but he's definitely at one with nature. Bernie had climbed the tree and was munching on the blood-red fruit, spitting out the stones. Brack! Hortensia complained when a stone hit her head. Daisy felt another chill breeze, which reminded her of something. Mrs. Mispelseed, why were you putting a harness on Hortensia when we got here? Oh, snuffleups, Mrs. Mispelseed cried, rubbing her hands furiously. It's time to read the weather. She pulled a heavy watch out of her pocket and flicked it open. Hortensia! We are going to miss it if you make any more mischief. Come, childrens, we must to climb. Hortensia clucked at Bernie, who immediately jumped down and grabbed her lead. The pair scrambled off after Mrs. Mispelseed, and Daisy had to run to catch up. When Mrs. Mispelseed suddenly stopped in the hallway, Bernie ran headlong into her, fell down, and got tangled in her skirts. Oh, Bernie, Daisy cried, have you hurt yourself? Let me help you. From the depths of the skirts came a muffled, I can help myself, thank you. When his head emerged from the folds of cloth, Bernie's black hair stood out in all directions. Mrs. Mispelseed hoisted the handle of an umbrella to catch the bottom rung of a ladder sticking through the ceiling. Don't just stand there, help me, she called. Daisy reached up, snatched the ladder, and yanked it down. Does we have all our equipment? Mrs. Mispelseed asked. She rifled through a cupboard, calling out each item as she passed it to Daisy. Rope, coat hanger, potato peeler, egg beater. Egg beater, Daisy asked. What do we need an egg beater for? You never know when you got to beat something like a cold. No time to waste. Get on the platform. The stone will get us most of the way. Then we got to climb. Hortensia flew through the hole in the ceiling and landed on a small wooden deck encircled by a handrail. Daisy guided her brother's hands to a rung of the ladder. He scrambled up with Daisy and the lady of the house hard on his heels. Standing on deck, Mrs. Mispelseed took an enormous stone off a shelf. It was bound with a rope tied to a pulley. Lucky for me, the stone gets heavier as it falls. That doesn't make any sense, Bernie objected. Poppycops! The stone will counterbalance our weight, then propel us upwards. Pull in your arms and legs, children, and hold on tight. Mrs. Mispelseed let out a little oomph as she lobbed the stone over the railing. Daisy watched it fall through a hole in the floor. The platform shuddered, then rose, first slowly, then ever faster. As they sped upward through the floors of the inside-out house, Daisy recognized the toy train that chugged through the butterfly room. A burly banana caterpillar rode on an engine as they sailed past. Soon they were flying through rooms she had never seen, and a dark ceiling rapidly approached. All three ducked their heads as they passed into a tunnel leading through an enormous aquarium, or possibly the ocean. Wind sighed in their ears. Magnets at the top of the tunnel will propel us way up into the sky. Indeed, as they shot out, a spray of salt water slapped their faces. Now they were ascending over a large body of water. Does the stone also work in reverse? Daisy asked. Fatzel, I hadn't considered that. How do we get back down? Bernie inquired. That is an exceptional question. Let us first complete our mission, then we launch that stone when we get to it. They came to rest in midair with the water far below. From here we climb. Mrs. Mispelseed pointed at a ladder above their heads and grabbed Hortensia's lead. Winds whipped around their ears as they latched on. A second platform awaited them at the top. Hortensia whizzed to and fro in the gusts of wind. Only her harness tied her to the group. A dark cloud was approaching. It would soon envelop them. Daisy braced herself for whatever it was about to strike. The cloud seemed to whir like many whispering voices. The sound grew louder and came at them from every direction. Are they? Bernie started to ask, but stopped to listen more intently. What could the cloud be? Mrs. Mispelseed asked. Butterflies? Bernie wondered. At that instant, Daisy felt them too, hundreds of silk wings powdering her cheeks. Indeed, monarch butterflies, Mrs. Mispelseed cried. What good fortune does we got here just in time? The little woman looked around. Hortensia, do your work. Hortensia seized the railing with her clawed feet and held the wings open, her wings open like sails. After a few moments, she dropped onto the platform into the middle of the trio and ran her beak through her feathers as if to clean them. When her head reappeared, she held up an orange and black winged creature. Before Mrs. Mispelseed could remove it, though, Hortensia snapped her beak shut, swallowing the insect. Hortensia, you crumpet! You are not supposed to eat the Danaeus plexipus. We need to speak with it. Hortensia rooted through her feathers again and emerged with another butterfly. Mrs. Mispelseed snatched it away, holding it delicately between two fingers while she retrieved a strange silver box from her skirt. She opened a flap and placed the creature inside. Now she tells us her traveling details. This is my animal translation device, she explained. It reads the communication of any creature small enough to fit inside and turns it into language we can understand. Maybe she tells us about the magnetic lines of the earth or the stress of her journey. Maybe she even got some gossip. Mrs. Mispelseed waited as the box hummed and purred. Daisy enjoyed the sensation of wings tapping against her face, tickling her eyelids. A stream of paper rolled out of a slot in the bottom of the device. Mrs. Mispelseed read, "Watch out, it is loose." She scratched her head. What is loose? Why should we watch out? Mrs. Mispelseed knocked on the device 3 times as if to say, we need more information. The device whirred again and spit out more paper. Mrs. Mispelseed read, "It has opened. We must get away." I still don't get it, Mrs. Mispelseed commented, shaking her head. She opened a compartment on the side to check if the batteries were low. Bernie stretched his head beyond the moving mass of insects. His body went rigid. He turned and shouted over the wind, "Get down now!" Daisy felt her brother's hand grab her skirt. He yanked until all four lay flat on the platform. Daisy could hear it now too. A sharp vroom, whoosh, whoosh, carved an arc through the atmosphere like the blades of a helicopter before liftoff. The butterflies were gone. A brutal blast of air churned through the space above their heads. It flattened their hair and chilled them to the bone. Their hearts pumped wildly until the wind passed by. Daisy looked at Mrs. Mispelseed. Mrs. Mispelseed stared at the box she still held in her hand. More paper rolled out with 3 words printed on it: the Polar Vortex. Calm returned to the air around them. 2 butterflies popped out of Hortensia's feathers and fluttered off. Mrs. Mispelseed sat up and asked the device, "What is this vortex and why is it bothering us?" Bernie and Daisy hugged themselves. Mrs. Mispelseed read the tape as it emerged. "The polar vortex is angry, so much energy is being released. Plant trees, bury cars." "Ha!" Mrs. Mispelseed exclaimed. "I've been saying that for ages." She opened the box and the butterfly flit a loop before continuing its migration. The older lady closed her eyes to rest. "Mrs. Mispelseed," Bernie asked, "how do we get down from here?" The feisty friend of migrating butterflies first aimed an eye at Bernie, then peered over the edge of the platform at the ocean far below. Daisy followed her gaze and saw a tiny black spot where the tunnel began. Mrs. Mispelseed stared at the children through her round glasses and confessed, "I don't know." "But surely you must have done this before," Daisy asked. "Last time I brought up 3 chickens. They flew me from the ladder to the tunnel. Now we are 3 people who cannot fly and only 1 stubborn bird." Mrs. Mispelseed looked drowsy. Daisy felt she would cry. Hortensia looked away as if to say, none of this was her fault. Bernie interrupted their thoughts. "I think I know a way." Daisy turned her frustration on her brother. "You couldn't possibly know how to get us down from this place." Bernie pulled out the egg beater, coat hanger, and rope and stuttered, I have a plan." Mrs. Mispelseed and Daisy stared at Bernie, then at each other. Bernie continued, "If we undo the wire from the egg beater and hanger, we can thread it through the hem of your skirt, Mrs. Mispelseed, making a parachute." "That is very kind of you, Bernie, to think about my welfare, but how will you and your sister get down?" "Using the rope, we tie ourselves to your waist so we hang below your skirt. Our skin will tell us which way the wind is blowing. The right gust will float us close enough to the tunnel. Then the powerful magnets will pull the metal in the potato peeler towards them." "Bernie, you are genius," Mrs. Mispelseed declared. The children crafted the skirt into a parachute and harnessed themselves to Mrs. Mispelseed's waist. Daisy took one more skeptical look at her brother, licked her finger, and held it high in the wind. Several gusts blew by, then Daisy cried out, "No!" Mrs. Mispelseed mumbled a prayer and leapt gracefully from the ladder. The children's weight tugged her downward as her skirts filled with air, slowing their fall. Daisy pointed the potato peeler at the tunnel and waited for the magnets to draw them in. Suddenly, a counterwind propelled them off course. All hope left Daisy as the group drifted away from their target. Before she could sob, though, Daisy heard wings batter the air. Hortensia cried, "Brack!" and flapped with all her might. Bit by bit, they inched toward the tunnel. Touching down in Mrs. Mispelseed's hallway, Daisy caught her breath. Bernie released Hortensia from her harness and felt his way toward the front door. "What's the rush?" Daisy asked. Bernie replied with an unusual force, "This is no fun ride, Daisy. The polar vortex is opening out into places it does not belong. We can stop this. I just need to find the right tools. We have to listen to the words of the monarch." "I trust your nose, Bernie," Daisy agreed. "Tell me what to do."